We are really so excited to hear from you this morning. Thank you for taking the time to share your experiences with the delegates of the conference. I am sure you don't really need any introduction at all, Stephen, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give a refresher of your bio for the delegates' purpose. So, Stephen van Coller joined EOH in September 2018 as a Group Chief Executive Officer. Prior to this, Stephen served at NTM Group Limited as its Vice President of Digital Services, Data Analytics and Business Development. Stephen previously worked for 10 years at Barclays Africa Group Limited, latterly as the Chief Executive of Corporate and Investment Banking from 2009 to 2016, where he oversaw business spanning across 13 African countries. Prior to ABSA, he worked at Deutsche Bank for 10 years, where he served as Managing Director of Investment Banking since 1996 and also served as a Foundation Trustee in South Africa and Head of Coverage and Corporate Advisory. He serves as a member of the World Economic Forum, represented on the Global Agenda Council on Values, as well as on the Global Agenda Council Committee on the Future of Banking. During his time at EOH, Stephen and the management team have cleaned up the balance sheet, reorganized the business, and built a significantly stronger risk management and governance structure and team. Stephen, with his team, focused on rebuilding the EOH credibility and reputation by addressing the corruption allegations and putting processes in place to protect the business. In 2020, Stephen and his team have been working tirelessly to manage the organizational response to COVID-19, including implementation of various cost-saving measures, delivering COVID-19 solutions to the market, and developing a bottom-up business strategy for EOH 2.0. Stephen remains committed to ensuring that EOH re-establishes its role as a preeminent South African provider of the information community technology products and solutions on the continent, and to ensure that EOH is well positioned, making a meaningful difference in South Africa. With this, Stephen, thank you very much, and I'm handing over to you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And welcome, everyone. It's great to be here again, having been here last year as well when we were in the thick of everything. So it will be interesting to have a bit of a chat about some of the progress that we made. What I'm going to do now is I'll share my screen, and as soon as it comes up, Okay, so really this talk is a follow-on from last year's one. If you remember, I talked about the lessons learned from 2019, and I spoke a little bit about how we had got through it. But looking back, a lot of what we did last year in our first crisis, although that was a corruption crisis and a lack of uncertainty crisis, it really prepared us well for what happened in COVID. And in fact, I shared on LinkedIn that actually our share price has gone up quite substantially during COVID, just because of the way we were able to manage it. So I think some of these lessons that we've learned are actually, even in the first crisis, are very applicable to what happened in COVID. So I've got the presentation in 3 bits, really just a quick refresh of the things I found and lessons learned, why the company tripped up, then what we did about it to actually get it back to almost normal, and then what we did in COVID, and you can see the thread that goes through them. So just thinking about, lessons learned and a quick recap. One of the things that I've definitely learned is just don't let a crisis go to waste. It is an opportunity to make changes, make them quickly, and to move forward. It's the one time that you can actually accelerate change. I think that's been one of my big learnings. The first one I talked about is, businesses are corrupt. Businesses aren't corrupt, people are. And that's quite important because corruption is instigated, normalized, and practiced by individuals who've made the choice to be corrupt. And if you don't have a culture of doing the right things in the right way with the right customers, you're going to have a problem because people will cut corners and those corners will catch you out. Combating that culture of corruption can revive the business, and I'll show some of that later. But in short, if you remember, I said culture beats strategy every single day. It's the most important thing, and it has to come from the top. The second thing, warning, is the complex corporate structures. These are particular risk of corrupt practices because they're very difficult to police and people can hide things. Sometimes complexity is actually there explicitly implemented to obscure. And the solution to this really is the accountability and transparency. One thing I've learned over time from auditing, chartered accountancy, you always complain about it, but actually the separation of crucial roles to avoid conflicts of interest are key. You can't have anyone who's poacher and gamekeeper, and that's what we found. Very autocratic, everything at the top, one or two people signing off everything, and they had almost omnipower. One thing I've done is I've made sure that I can't sign anything on the bank account, so I can't pay anything. I don't have signing authority on any of our accounts. Only the FD has that. But the FD doesn't have the ability to sign off on who can be loaded as a supplier on our system. That goes through the Chief Risk Officer and the Chief Procurement Officer. And so between the three of us, we manage that triangle, and none of us can be poacher and gamekeeper. And actually, in a way, it's actually very important because you do protect the employees from any outside pressure because they physically cannot implement something on their own. 3, I talked about the limited governance and compliance. These are early indicators. If you just have a look, we had, if you remember, one a compliance officer for nearly 11,000 employees. It just wasn't possible that one person could do a proper job. You can also, have a quick look at minutes of exco meetings, minutes of risk meetings, and see how diligent, people are. But really, your checks and balances need to, they're vital, and they should be established in 3 layers. The frontline employees should have accountability, need to report. You then have a second line of defense, which is the compliance and internal audit function. And then your third line of defense is external audit. And you need to make sure that those run separately from each other. The 4th bit was board independence was crucial. It's very, very easy to have a look and see how independent the board actually is, how long they've been there. We in South Africa have got really world-class governance guidelines in the King Code, and we should be implementing those, especially if we're listed companies. But if you see that these aren't being implemented 100%, it should raise a flag. And you can very quickly have a look at the quality of meetings, presentation packs, while we're investing pensioners' money, I think these are almost minimum standards that sit in the King Code. Don't let anyone tell you different. 5th, one thing we learned very quickly was make it easy for whistleblowers. I mean, this was one thing that really made a fundamental difference. You learn very quickly that 99% of people want to do the right thing, are proud of the company they work at, are proud of what they do, and they will actually be your best policeman. But you need to make it easy. You need to give them feedback. you need to take it seriously. Tell them when they've got the wrong perception, tell them when they've got it right. And there really needs to be visible action and visible communication. It's a very courageous thing they're doing, and they need to feel supported and protected, obviously. But you can get a lot of information out of, whistleblowers. Number 6, I talked about not using middlemen. The problem with middlemen is that they aren't employed by you, you've got no control over them, and you don't know what they are doing when you're not watching. And I think today, if you're using middlemen, you're definitely using the wrong business model. There are ways to protect yourself by obviously signing contracts with anti-bribery and corruption wording in them with people, but remember, they carry your brand, and if you can't control them, they could do something. Some of this can be referred to fronting if the middlemen aren't doing anything, and as you know, that's illegal, so one needs to be very careful about that. And I suppose lastly, I said if you don't stand for something, you stand for nothing, and I think this is probably the most important thing that one needs to realize. If you're compromised even slightly once, you're eternally compromised. You can never come back from that. And, what has kept us going at EOH is this realization that 99% of people truly want to do the right thing. That people want to subscribe to a moral code that makes them feel good and feel worthy. Everyone in business needs to be accountable for delivery of their bit. And so this is not only best practice for employee satisfaction, but it also ensures the right culture from the top. I suppose you can never be prepared for any 100% prepared for any kind of crisis, but when you hit one or you expect one, make sure you're ready. And I think this is the biggest lesson learned is don't wait for a crisis to get your company ready. Do it up front, because you don't know when that crisis is coming. You know there's going to be one at some stage, but you don't know when, and you don't know how big. And, when the enemy's coming, and they're coming at some point in time, you can't wait for them to arrive to see how big their guns are and then run around and try and retaliate. You need to put your best foot forward. And so some of the things I talk in part 3, I think everyone should be doing every day to make sure that you make your company anti-fragile. So I think if you go back, the one thing that the main challenges we faced when that first whistleblowing report came out in the media was, first of all, reputation. You had customers and clients asking, and investors asking, what's going on, and potentially leaving, and we had to deal with that. There was a loss of confidence. I needed to make sure my staff didn't leave. They were demoralized, and I think, as in quite often in these crises, you end up with quite a lot of debt, because as people steal the money, they go and borrow from the banks, and we ended up with 4 billion of debt, and we only had EBITDA of just under R1 billion. So we were 4 times leveraged, and for a services company, that's pretty extreme. Fortunately, and I'll talk about it in part 2, we've recovered largely from that with a debt much closer to the 2 billion, or at the moment around 2.4. But what we did is we created a credibility, a 3-prong attack: credibility, transparency, and liquidity. And I'm going to take you through each of those. But we decided that we needed to have a goal, and each of them had to have some key work items, and we focused on those to make sure that we survived. So on credibility, the first thing we had to do was obviously deal with the allegations, and that was really important. We had to be transparent on those outcomes, and then we had to go and rebuild an ethical business. The most important thing was that what was found in the past didn't continue in the future. And so we really had to draw a line in the sand. The first thing we did is we went and got an third-party, independent third-party to run the investigation. We gave them all the information. We didn't, so they had 100% unfettered access, and they went out and they did their investigation. Yes, it cost a lot, but remember, we were saving a whole business of over 10,000 jobs at the time. So it was very important that we had this arm's length. We created on the board, there was a proper board committee that ran it, so that it wasn't me controlling it or the chief risk officer. So there was also, from a perception point, there was absolutely no chance that I could be manipulating the outcome. And you can see when we were transparent on the outcomes, this is what we put out there. This is actually in my year-end annual report presentation in October. We were totally honest. We didn't shy away from the truth. This slide is an actual slide that I put up. Got a lot of gasps when I presented it at the year end, but this was factually what we'd found. But the most important lesson that I learned from this is, once you're up front, no one can continue throwing mud at you, because it's all there. It's in the open, and it's very difficult then to niggle from behind. Furthermore, we created a brand new board and a new management team. So we had a brand new executive team, obviously exiting those people who were directly involved, but also those who let it happen on their watch was extremely difficult. But, looking back, it was probably one of the most important decisions the board made, because at least when I went to tell customers, I could, credibly tell them that it's a new board, it's new management. The people that were implicated, or the people that turned a blind eye, or the people that didn't do the right thing by, leading by example, were gone. And this is new and a new company, and I could tell them what the new board and the new management were going to do. And this is really was, getting that credibility back. This was rebuilding the ethical business. And so, when I talked about businesses are not corrupt people, this was really important. If you have a look at May, this is our basic, risk matrix or risk map, roadmaps with the 7 pillars of governance. And we were very red when we went through it. Clearly, I'd gone out and got myself one of the best risk officers. I actually got them out of the financial services sector, so she could help us rebuild it. And this is what we've achieved in just over a year. A lot of green patches, obviously not all green. These things take time. I think last time I spoke about these things take 2 to 3 years to really embed in the organization. One thing that's been very interesting is the real willingness of the staff to actually get involved. And in the first year, we've had an over 95% completion of our compliance and governance training, which I think is just amazing. I haven't seen that in the other organizations that I have worked in. So that goes to this heart of, 99% of people want to do the right thing, and they have. They've really gone out there. They understood how important was this, and they've actually, done it. But anyway, these policies and procedures that were put in place from the process really enabled this seamless, robust, well-governed, transition into the remote working environment in COVID. It also allowed our business to function effectively, and alongside, the strong governance practices within a contactless environment. For example, all our public sector deals, as well as related partners, were initially reviewed, screened, and vetted by EOH Africa. We've now taken that expertise and built an in-house team, and we've built up that capacity and skill. And this is how we manage it. And people know that's how we're going to do it. And this is really about changing the culture and just letting people understand how we do business. But importantly, it gives them protection because they know there's a clear process that they are following. Liquidity. This is obviously a key, and this is one of the key things I talk about in part 3. This is about giving your business flexibility. We had, because we were forced to, we had to deleverage the balance sheet, and we had to go back to basics. So first of all, we went and sold non-core assets. We sold about 1.4 billion, about 41 entities in about 12 months. I always laugh because when I was an investment banker, the one thing we tried every year was to beat the other banks and have the most M&A deals, and you won something called the Deal Maker of the Year award. Sadly, as a banker, I never won that, but I think last year with the team, I'm not sure there's any bank in South Africa who did 41 transactions. So I'll take that with the team as a win, and at least I can tick that off my bucket list. More importantly, as we deleveraged the balance sheet, we needed to take that money and pay the banks back, and in 12 months we went from 4.1 billion. We're now just under 2.5 billion, with some more deleveraging plans over the next 12 months. So a big difference, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But you also need to become efficient. So we reduced costs significantly. We were quite aggressive in closing loss-making businesses. We negotiated settlements with any of our licensing partners or OEMs where we had off-balance sheet settlement. We deregistered entities to reduce the cost of, whether it's audits, whether it's financial accounts, and we continue to simplify the structure. As you know, last year I talked about having 272 legal entities. We're busy trying to get that down to probably about 60 over the next 18 months. We also reduced a lot of our property costs. I had about 110,000 square meters of unused property, and you can just think about the rates, taxes, connectivity costs of empty property. That's about half of Sandton City. In 2020, we actually reduced our property portfolio by 50 buildings, leased exits, property sales, disposals, and approximately about 100 million rands annualized saving, about 78,000 square meters we sold. And then lastly, we introduced a treasury management system to make sure that we could go back to basics and manage the cash. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. COVID obviously helped us. Interest rates have halved. So when you're paying a lot of interest on debt and it goes from 12% to 6%, that's a huge difference for us. The other thing that was quite interesting is that we were able to accelerate some initiatives to cut costs, obviously, like travel, entertainment. We did some salary cuts. We pushed harder on the property costs and renegotiated with our landlords. But what was very interesting was that when we went into the crisis, we were probably at the bottom 25% of the bank's books in terms of worrisome customers. But with COVID, and some unfortunate companies, their revenue went to zero. If you're in the hospitality industry, if you're in the airline industry, in the gaming industry. And so very quickly, we were no longer bottom 25%. We were probably in the top 50%. And that helped us, obviously, also move forward. And as I said, you can see we did an enormous amount there. So we didn't waste the crisis. What was quite important, though, was the last bit was around transparency. And this was really about creating a transparent business model, provide transparent reporting, and develop a strategy for growth. So the first thing we did, we had to go back to basics. We created clear business units, so there was clear accountability. We reported to EBITDA, margin level for every BU. We made the numbers available to all senior staff, and when you've got 4 billion of debt and only around 800 million of EBITDA and a number of off-balance sheet settlements to clear out, cash is king. One of my staff said to me, revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, cash is reality. And this was one thing we really had to get right. And so we started managing cash on a daily basis by business unit. So each business unit learned very quickly that they had to save for VAT, for tax, for salaries, for bonuses. They really need to manage their cash, and it was amazing how quickly people learned about their businesses. Secondly, we had to develop a strategy for growth. You had to give the company a North Star. Everyone needed to know where they were going. And really, we did the first bottom-up, zero-based strategy in 22 years. It was really interesting. We nearly stopped the process because we had just started it, and COVID hit. But we decided to, do it online, on Zoom, even though it was untested, because we just had a feeling people would have a bit more time. And as it turned out, it created amazing cohesion in the business, because the top leadership, probably about 300 people, were then spending a lot of time thinking about their future, thinking about their competitors, thinking about their customers, and it was a very healthy exercise that kept people in contact. We also had cross-divisional challenge sessions, which served the dual purpose of getting our people to understand more about the various businesses, but also created great accountability and transparency across the business. And then lastly, we communicated this to all staff once we had agreed the strategy, taken it through the board, and we had this strategy in Bezos to allow anyone who wanted to ask questions, understand where they fitted into the business, and that was massively successful. The most important thing there, I suppose, is that you want everyone to actually just row in the same direction. Imagine having a boat and you don't row in the same direction. And we had to then regain investors' confidence. We ensured, there was a consistent treatment of accounts. There was clear and easy disclosure. We hosted an investor day to unpack the business and strategy so people could understand it. And we've put everything on our website for people to view, the good, the bad, and the ugly. This is who we are, and there's nothing to hide. And then March 2020, another crisis hits. There's new normal, new challenges. We have load shedding, government debt, Moody's and Fitch downgrades, and COVID-19 meant it was a very, very tough economic environment. They were talking of GDP being minus 10%. All of a sudden, businesses all remote working. How do they do that? There's obviously security issues around that. Some client revenue is going to zero, and suddenly we need to deal with employee well-being as well. This was, really important. Fortunately, there were three main things that happened. As I said, interest rates halved, which helped us. Customers needed increased support for remote working, and the issues around security. So there was more work, and although RFPs slowed down, it meant that the contracts that were meant to be RFP'd got rolled, and that helped us. But one thing you do need to do is make sure you're ready. So if I just go through the sort of 7 things, one is it's key that you are proactive, increase the pace of decision making. Don't wait until you see the enemy coming. to start preparing your defenses. By then it's too late. As Alex Ferguson says, the worst decision is no decision. You can always change a bad decision. And I think that's really, really important. One decision we made was to actually go on lockdown a week before lockdown actually happened, just to test it out. And that was quite a quick decision. We did it quickly, but it made a huge difference. And I suppose don't rest on your laurels. Push harder, make decisions faster, innovate, create new products for the new normal. Expect it to be a disruption, not an interruption. And then you really do, go to the new normal. The 3 C's, as I call them: communicate, communicate, communicate. You cannot engage and communicate enough with all your stakeholders during these times of uncertainty. Don't let anyone assume what's going on. Keep them updated. We went from monthly board updates to weekly board updates. We went actually from monthly staff updates to twice weekly staff updates, really, so that we could deal with any changes and uncertainty. We eventually settled into a weekly staff update, which has just been massively helpful for the business. And we did it at 9:30 in the morning, so that people could exercise in that 6 to 9 window in the beginning. And then we also had our daily war room, calls every single day for an hour, just so we can make decisions quickly and get going. Third is be involved, so you understand the issues. I made sure that the senior leadership was on all the calls, so we all had the same information in the beginning. Later we delegated more, but it really made the decision making much more rich because everyone had the same information, and it really serves to control perceptions. We even created our property people created something called Rio TV, and they had daily exercise classes on there, daily facts, daily anything, just as a fun way to communicate with all the staff, and that gave us a lot of information back, and it allowed us very quickly to understand what was going on with our staff. Fourth, you really need to have a clear vision that you can articulate so that everyone's pointing in the same direction. I always think of rowers in a rowing boat. If they can all row as hard as they like, if they're not rowing in the same direction, it's a lot of effort and they go nowhere. But we were very lucky. We were going through that strategy process, and it really helped us give everyone a clear vision. You need to build resilience. I talk about the anti-fragility, but you need top performers to ensure you succeed. You need to agree a course, and you need to trust the people that are going to execute. It's a bit like a battle. You can do your planning, but once you send the general out there with their troops and they're in the line of fire, they don't have the chance to come back. You've really got to have the best people, and I think this is absolutely critical. Also, you need to make sure you're not wasting any money, because cash is king in a crisis. So anything you can save on, anything you can do to shore up your defenses or your liquidity, you have to do. You should be doing this anyway every day, but in a crisis, just that much more important. I also think on anti-fragility, you can't have a single customer reliance. You can't have a single product reliance. You can't have a single sector reliance. You have to have as many irons in the fires as possible. So as you build your company strategy, you really need to think about these black swan events. This whole efficiency is really, really important. I know Nassim Taleb, talks about this in his Black Swan book about anti-fragility. Probability doesn't matter if the event, if it happens, is terminal to the business. And I really have a look at our risk, meetings very, very differently these days, just because I really want to, try and tease out what are the things that if they happen, are going to make life very difficult for us. So this anti-fragility is really important. And then lastly, you need to stay close to customers. What we did very quickly is we worked out which customers were in trouble, which customers were difficult. We created over 70 solutions, and we went marketing to them. And I was very proud of how the team did that. We went and actually spoke directly with all our customers that had their revenue affected, readjusted things if we had to, slow down things if we have to, and help them. We did the CEO Corner app, which allowed and we used it at EOH, and this is really just managing employees. We added something to it called Get Space now, so you can actually book office space. We stood up. We did a lot of pro bono work for the Solidarity Fund. Stood up their website over a weekend with all the payment gateways. You would have seen in the president's speech yesterday they raised over 3.1 billion. We set up a fully compliant mobile intensive care unit called Inculate, and we also did a range of telemedicine technology. There's other things we've done from there, but your customers are your lifeblood. You need to assist them in a crisis, and then they are customers for life. If you drop them, they never really want to be around you again. But also being relevant in a crisis makes your people feel proud of where they work, and this is a priceless culture changer. You just can't beat that. And just remember what I said in the beginning: culture beats strategy every single day. Thank you very much. That is. I hope that was useful. I'm not sure if there's a Q&A session now, but we're back live.
Hi, Stephen. Thank you so much for this inspiring presentation. And one thing I really took from this is that, it's not only about the tone at the top at any organization. It's about the people. It's about the individuals. Also, it's simply about staying true to yourself, to your morals, your principles, and simply doing the right thing for each and every individual. So thank you very much for this. And there is definitely a Q&A session. So one of the questions that was asked, I just want to see which one has got the most. Okay. So one of the questions is it more difficult to change the culture of an existing organization than to create a culture in a brand new organization? How do you change the culture of an existing team with a long existing culture of unethical behavior?
That's a great question. I mean, clearly it's much more difficult to change an existing culture. I mean, one of the things that was very difficult when I came in to EOH was the fact most people, I think the average length of tenure there was 8 years. And if you had a look at the management team, it was probably close to 12 or 14 years. So it was very inculcated. They had a certain way of doing things. They'd grown very fast by buying lots of different small businesses, which also created a very fragmented culture. But I think the first thing is you need to keep it simple, and you do need to lead from the top. It's very important that your management team buys into it. And the one thing about culture that's so important, if you're very clear about it, you're actually being quite fair to your employees because it allows them to make choices. People can make a choice. Do I like this culture or don't I like it? If you don't like it, you can leave, and that's fine. If you do like it, you actually attract more people. And it was quite interesting when we started transparently putting out who we stood for, what we were going to do. There was a lot of people external who started sending in CVs saying, I want to come and help. I want to be part of this. I want to be part of the change. And that also gave existing staff quite an interesting boost that people actually wanted to come and wanted to be part of this organization. So they understood it was a great organization, had just lost its way, almost like an errant child. And you then start building that confidence back. And once you make people accountable, once you're transparent, people feel much more comfortable. And so it's about being just clear and transparent, what we stand for and what we don't stand for. And as I said, 99% of people are actually really good people. And if you give them guidelines, it actually protects them and allows them to go out into the business with customers and be very certain. If someone wants to do something, they can say, no, I'm not allowed to do that. And that gives them the protection. If you don't have that in place, it really puts them under pressure because, everyone's going to interpret rules differently. But if it's simple, straightforward, and they know they've got the protection of the CEO if they go along that route, it makes a big difference.
Then there's another question that a lot of people are asking, and they're saying, you have done a lot to rid the company of the fraudsters. How do you feel about the further fine imposed against EOH by the JSE after everything you and the company have done to clean it up?
Great question. I actually penned an article for that in the Business Day. It absolutely irritated me, and it's not really the JSE's fault. I mean, the problem with capitalism and how it's been created with these limited liability companies is the company lives on, even though it's got new people. The problem is that if you're fining the existing management, I mean, we're fighting for our lives. It's almost, a kid falls in a pool, and as they come up for breath, you push them down so they can't take their breath. And personally, I didn't mind the fine. What really irritated me is that I had to actually pay money away when I was struggling to save the business. And if you sort of take it to its extreme, maybe we should have just liquidated the company, and then no one can come and fine me. And you move on. You take the people, you create a new business, and you carry on. Clearly, that's not the right thing to do, but. What I would hope is that as you save these jobs, as you clean up, as you get rid of the crooks, as you prosecute them, that people leave you alone and say, okay, happy to put you, a sanction with a suspended sentence. If you do it again, then you have to pay the fine. But to actually take the money out of the company is very irritating. It's like when the banks, they lend the money, something happens in the company, then they want to charge you penalty interest while you're trying to save the company. It's counterproductive. Anyway, so I do think capitalism and the structures need to change, but that's a whole nother discussion.
Yeah, and a whole day to be set aside for that debate. Stephen, thank you so much. If I could ask you, there's really a lot of questions still that the delegates would want to ask you. If you could please make some time available in the VIP section so that the delegates can interact with you after the session, we'll appreciate it. And once again, thank you very much. Have a lovely day.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Bye.